I'd like to welcome up the first speaker of the Affirmative.
Thank you. Parenting influencers do nothing except for harm their own kids and harm the parents who watch their content. 3 things for you in my speech today. Firstly, on setup, my first point will be on exploitation. My second point will be on how this is harmful to other parents. Firstly, on setup, I just want to note that the people we care about the most here are the kids of these parent influencers and are the people who are actually consuming their content, which we've identified as other parents or people who are thinking about having kids. What do we define parenting influencers as? We define this as people who basically revolve most of their content around posting about their kids, posting about being a parent. They probably have lots of followers and engagement. This isn't your average Facebook mum posting a back to school photo, okay? So, first point here on how this is exploitation, okay? Firstly, parent on context. Parent influencers get their fame and their following off of posting content about their children. Everything they post basically revolves around their kids and interactions with their kids. Secondly, to be a successful influencer, the nature of the job means that you need to post content which is attention grabbing, which means that the moments of their kids that they are posting are going to be moments which will provoke an emotional reaction in people, moments that people will find entertaining or find interesting. So first mechanism here is on predators, right? We think that parents, whether it's intentional or not, can post content of their kids, especially when they are younger, which puts them in a vulnerable position, right? An example of unintentional was an influencer who literally posted a video of her 3-year-old in a bathtub, and then this video got 100,000 saves on social media of this 3-year-old in a bathtub. We think this kind of content is designed to get engagement, and it means that you open up a door for predators to access sexually implicit content, right, and get away with it, because you aren't going to be persecuted for liking a video of a half-naked baby on social media because their parents thought it was just a cute post, right? But you will get arrested for actually going out and sexually harassing a child. This is where social media allows predators to have a safe haven and access to explicit content about kids or potentially explicit content. Secondly, on harassment, when a kid is posted all of the time, it means that a lot of their personal moments are probably going to end up being posted on social media because it is attention grabbing, and that's what these parents want. E.g., examples where they might be mad or upset or having a really cute happy moment, things like that. What this means is it opens up a door for online harassment of people who are just trolls, your internet trolls who will hate on people for absolutely no reason or just for being human and having emotions, or people who will go out and harass this kid for being spoiled and being a brat because they're an influencer kid or because they're having normal human emotions, and that makes them a bad kid because they cried. Thirdly, on bullying, right? We think that especially as these kids grow up, a lot of these moments that these parents post on social media is probably going to become embarrassing to them. And we think that they're probably going to end up having their whole lives posted on social media. I also want to note here that kids can be inherently cruel to each other or just have no filter. So when kids see somebody in their school who they think is famous and has a following, either they're going to get jealous and just bully them for it because why can't I have a famous parent influencer, or they're going to see this content and think it's just really, really funny and oh, I can make fun of them because they're an influencer, they put their life out there, I can just criticize them for it. And so we think this means that these kids can often be the victim of bullying within their own schools and within their communities where they live. So what are the impacts of this? Firstly, it means that you literally open up a door for pedophiles to sexually harass kids online. This is really, really harmful because obviously we don't want people being sexually exploited in general, but especially when it comes to children. And this is literally creating a safe space for pedophiles to go online and access implicit content of kids, whether parents are intending it or not, and you are allowing them to get away with it. Secondly, the child is probably going to end up with very damaged self-esteem as a result of being harassed or being bullied in school, which is really, really harmful. Secondly, we think that they're probably Secondly, we think that they're probably going to just like be humiliated, right? Because honestly, when you've got like content that's being posted about you all the time, like you're going to think that your baby videos are pretty embarrassing as you grow up. And if your parents are like putting that up on social media, you're probably going to feel like really embarrassed. And like when you see that this content isn't going to be like taken down, that's probably going to be even further damaging to your self-esteem.
Right.
And we also think that it's a bit of like a privacy violation, right? Because then kids are going to be like constantly thinking about the fact that their parents are like filming them, or worried that their parents are like going to whip out a camera and film them as soon as they get upset about something because like they want content. We think that this is just really unfair for kids who are just like trying to experience growing up, having normal human emotions, to feel like their parents aren't going to listen to them and whip out a camera, right? Why is this so terrible? Well, firstly, it means that kids are probably going to develop like a lot of mental health problems. They probably are going to struggle with anxiety just from the level of harassment that they would probably see. They probably are going to end up with like trust issues, because if you can't trust your parent to be there and listen to you instead of whipping out a camera to film you, then you're probably not going to trust anybody, and you're probably going to like really struggle with a lot of social interactions. Okay, second point here on how this is harmful to other parents. What is the context on this? We think, as I'm just reiterating, that the largest audience for these parental influences will be people who are other parents or people who are thinking about having kids, right? We also want to note here that often the nature of these parental influences is they try and market themselves as being relatable to these parents, and they try to market themselves as being like someone who's just another parent who's here to help you, right? And so we think this means that when parental influencers see this, they think that they're watching somebody who they should be able to relate to. Okay, my first point here is on selective posting. These are influencers just like any other influencer out there, right? They only post like the good moments on social media, or the moments that they actually want people to see of them being a good parent, of them giving like good parenting advice, right? So this means that like they'll probably be posting a lot of moments where they're like, these are my top 5 best parenting tips that you should all follow. Like, this was my postpartum body. Like, after 3 weeks, like I look amazing and I have like a 6-pack, even though like they've probably got like 20K worth of plastic surgery to look like that, right? And we think that this sets like an unrealistic precedent for a lot of parents because of things like money, circumstances, things like that. They literally just can't achieve this, like what a lot of other influencers have. And this means that it like sets a precedent that they should look like that because of the casual nature of social media, where parents think they should be able to like relate to these influencers, and these influencers market themselves as trying to be relatable. We think this is really harmful because then parents feel like they have that pressure to be that way, even though it might not actually be possible for them. Second, on materiality, is that influencers always like to post like their perfect photos and like showing off like all of these cool things that they have. They do this with their kids as well in terms of parental influences, right? Like you see those ones who have like these whole massive wardrobes for like their toddler, or these ones who are like, look at all these cool toys that I bought my kid, right? And so we think this like basically normalizes like giving material things to your kid as a way of like showing like your love and how you appreciate them, instead of like actually just being a present parent. And we think like, again, this is unrealistic for most parents, and they aren't in a position to do this. And we think that this results in like, firstly, impacts a lot of parents feeling guilty that they aren't like good enough as a parent, or they aren't looking after their kids well enough because they can't like provide them with all these cool material things. Secondly, like literal physical dysmorphia, right, where you see influencers showing like their postpartum bodies. We think this is really harmful, right? It's like gym bros like giving young men body dysmorphia even though they're jacked up on like 200 grams of creatine, right, that like young men just can't afford. And we think this means that parents also suffer from like mental health problems. Firstly, because like, especially in like a habit or feminism era, when like women especially have like a lot of pressure to like be all 3 things and like be a boss and have a family and like have a social life, right? We think that this just adds to the amount of pressure, and for a lot of women it is completely unrealistic to achieve like what these influencers have, and so it means that they feel like a lot of pressure to like look this way. What does this result in? It results in like having like just harms to your mental health, and we think this actually makes it more difficult for them to parent. Parenting is stressful enough when you don't feel like you have all this pressure to like be a certain way. And so we think that this means that just overall that they're going to be worse off mentally and in a bad place with their kids, and this is why we think this should stand.
Thank you for your speech. We want to welcome up the next speaker of the Negating team.
Parenting is stressful, parenting is difficult, and parents often don't have a comforting outlet to ask for advice. This is really bad. This is what we're trying to fix. 3 things in my speech then. Firstly, some notes on setup. Secondly, a point about offering comfort and emotional support to new parents. And lastly, on how we just get better parents on our side of the house. On to setup then, I think the first question to ask is what a parenting influencer actually is. We hear from AF that the large amount of posts surrounding on a parenting influencer's page are going to be like embarrassing and emotional posts of their child. However, simultaneously, we hear in their introduction that it's not going to be your average Facebook mom posting a first day of school photo. Not insofar as that most parents post emotional moments of their children, insofar as most parents do post these kinds of special moments with their kids, it's unclear why one random parent is going to get popular and have this insane influencer status surrounding them for posting the same material that all parents across the board generally post about their parents. Next in, on what we believe a parenting influencer is, I think it looks like a lot of these Instagram, Facebook channels, easily accessible social media platforms, posting videos and pictures revolving around the parent, showcasing mainly the parent themselves, speaking about their experiences, speaking about their struggles. This looks like a lot of parents filming themselves, talking about parenting strategies, talking about coping mechanisms. Videos like days in the life of a parent. I think this kind of content isn't largely focused on the child, insofar as all parents post content relating to the child, unclear why one random person is going to become popular. Next then, on what the likely counterfactual is, note we didn't actually hear one from AF, so what do we propose? I think firstly, for the majority of parents, the amount of casual discussion around parenting is largely decreased. This is harmful for reasons I'll discuss in my first point, but I think secondly, the only presence of actual parenting showcased online in an accessible manner comes from celebrities, comes from people whose parents are naturally in the spotlight. Note that this is particularly harmful for new parents, particularly harmful for the average person who doesn't have the money, who doesn't have the resources that celebrities do. This kind of content that is inherently accessible to a lot of people on our side of the house is inherently harmful. Moving on to my first point then, about comfort and support to the parents. What do you need to know here? Well, I already told you this. Raising children is insanely difficult. This is pretty intuitive, and it's agreed upon by AF. However, a lot of people often feel really ashamed asking for help. A couple reasons why we believe this. We tell you that raising an entire human being by yourself or with one other person is really, really stressful, right? It's very high stakes situation, and if you show some form of uncertainty, if you seem like you don't know what you're doing, there are a lot of consequences for the child you're bringing into the world. Secondly, we tell you that there is an expectation from society that parents, particularly mothers, are just supposed to know what they're doing. There is a biological narrative of a parenting instinct. People are expected to just know, and it's sometimes looked down upon to ask for help. How do we fix this then with parenting influences? Couple reasons here. I think firstly, advice in general is a lot more casual and it's a lot more relatable. We tell you that influencers who share specific tough stories of their struggles often resonate with parents. Note that this coincides with a general rise of less polished, less perfected content. People just going on the internet without a full face of makeup, without a whole camera team to make them look good. What this means then is that as a young mother, you're likely to see another young mother who looks disheveled, who has eyes under her bags, who probably looks a lot like you do, struggling to raise your child. This kind of content resonates more with parents. It makes them feel more comfortable rather than just reading words in a book, rather than just reading words in an article. I think secondly, we tell you there's just generally an increased amount of discussion around parenting. 2 reasons here. I think a lot of parents just want to help other parents online, and secondly, parents are just sharing more struggles when they see other people posting about it. Note that this is uniquely beneficial to us because now parents are able to just comment under another influencer's post rather than having to write a whole article, rather than having to open an entire book. Note this is particularly important because parents are generally time poor, right? These parents have to balance work, they have to balance life, and they have to balance raising an entire human being. These people don't have the time to sit down, open a book, and look for the specific situation they're dealing with. It's a lot easier to just open up your Facebook and see a video of someone just talking about how they're dealing with that instead. What does this mean overall then? I think first of all, parents parents are just less ashamed about asking for advice. I think, firstly, this takes a massive weight off their shoulders. I've already told you that parents are particularly stressed. They're emotionally strained. If you are able to make them feel a little bit better, if you're able to provide them a little bit of emotional ease, this is particularly important. I think this mainly looks like a lot of parents no longer thinking they're terrible people for simply not knowing how to deal with the situation or feeling tired or feeling strained. I think, secondly, this is particularly important for teen parents or young new parents who've spent most of their life growing up on the internet, growing up on social media. Why do we think this is particularly important for those people? Firstly, these people are disproportionately shunned and shamed by society for having kids so young, for having kids when they haven't made their life yet. And I think, secondly, they resonate a lot more with people on social media insofar as they've grown up consuming this material. It's easier for them to understand. It's easier for them to relate with. I think, lastly then, a lot of parents simply feel validated. You'll feel a lot better seeing the physical manifestation of someone's struggle rather than just reading the words, parenting is hard. I think this is a lot of emotional ease for an actor who is particularly stressed out, for an actor who's feeling particularly bad about life. This is really important. You should consider this highly. Next then, before I move on to my second point, I'll take a POI.
Okay, considering that you've given the framework that women are really scared of being judged for being bad parents, why are they likely to start posting on social media about the fact that they are so severely suffering with postpartum depression and that they hate their child for this depression that they have caused? Why are they more likely to post about this in your world?
I think a lot of women in general understand that a lot of other women are probably suffering the same struggles they are. They probably want to offer a safe haven. Note that with the rise of these influences, you're going to see an increased amount of women feeling more comfortable, feeling less ashamed. We don't get this on side AF when you don't have a person on the internet talking about this in the first place. Someone needs to take the first step for this to happen. Moving on to my next point then, about how we simply get better parents. I think what you need to know here, this is stuff I've already told you. Parenting is a huge responsibility, and there's a narrative that it should come to someone naturally. How do we make better parents then? A couple reasons here. I think, firstly, the barrier to entry in terms of asking for advice, asking for help, and providing this advice and help is lowered. No, I've already told you, this is especially important for new generations of parents who've grown up on social media. I've already touched on this. I think, secondly, in terms of the algorithm around parenting influencers, telling you, to be a successful influencer, your algorithm needs to select for your content, right? People actually need to see your content. This looks like people sharing your content. This looks like people liking your content. What does this mean then? This means that parents who do post their experiences online are likely to give concrete, likely to give practical, likely to give implementable advice, and they're likely to be very truthful about their experiences, right? Why do we think this is likely? I think if you show up on social media, you've got a full glam on and you're acting like, your postpartum life experiences are all fine and dandy, a lot of people are not going to relate to you. A lot of people are not going to feel positively about your content and are thus not going to like and share it to other parents. You're unlikely to be very popular if you're highly unrelatable, if you look like your life is particularly out of reach. No, this directly responds to what we hear at AF. What does this mean then? This means that people can simply learn how to do things better. People feel better about what their life is like as a parent. And I think it looks like a lot of people reflecting on their parenting as they're able to now compare it more easily to another parent online. This is particularly important. Proud to affirm.
Big speech, and I'd like to welcome the second speaker of the returning team.
was the child of a parenting influencer, and I come across a video of me literally being incubated in hospital because I am on the verge of death, and she's dancing, talking about the fact that I am close to dying, I would be pretty upset. I would think my mum probably didn't care about me a lot in that moment. She cared more about the likes she was going to receive, the shares that post was going to receive, and the engagement overall with that content. Okay. A few things I'll be doing for my speech today. Firstly, disagreement on their setup. Secondly, the first point of clash on the comfort and support that parents actually receive from this content. Secondly, on the quality of parenting that actually comes from this. And then sort of contingent on that, my point on why this is worse parenting. Okay, so we were told that we need a counterfactual because this is a regrets motion. I actually don't think that that is the case. We literally just need to say why this thing is so inherently harmful. But then also, they said that most parents are going to post content about really embarrassing things. I don't think you see your average parent of an autistic child posting their meltdowns in public on social media, right? What you do see is these attention-seeking, engagement-seeking influencers posting these inherently harmful videos of their child having an extreme breakdown in public, right? And then secondly, they said that this is more content about being parents and not so much about their kids. You can literally not be a parent without a child, therefore their content has to inherently revolve around their children. Okay, now going on to the first point of clash of the comfort and the support that parents actually see. So we were given this idea that raising kids is inherently stressful. People feel like they're going to suffer consequences if they're not sure on how to be a parent, and mums cannot ask for help. I think because humans have literally been raising little humans for the entirety of humanity, little biology lesson, we do have a level of instinctive parenting that happens, right? But you also generally do have support systems, right? If you have a mum, she's probably going to be able to say, this is what I did when you were a colic baby. If you do not have that mum, you might have a grandmother, you might have a friend, you might literally have a doctor who helped you give birth, right? These are all support systems in place that do not require social media. We have been living without social media for a very long time. We did not see large amounts of women going, oh my gosh, worst parent in the entire world. That's literally just not how it works. So that entire characterization is false, and therefore most of their content is not true. But then, if that is true, I flagged this in my POI, if women are so ashamed of being bad parents, they are not going to post about this, right? Because they are genuinely going to be terrified of these internet trolls telling them you are a bad human being for the fact that you have postpartum depression, right? Or you look so bad 3 months after giving birth, and we don't like your body, so you shouldn't be posting about that, right? You have these trolls on social media who literally don't care. But then, also, we were given content that these people are going to give very honest advice and be very honest. Ella gave you a lot of content as to why people selectively post things, right? I'm not going to post a video of myself screaming and crying because I'm sad that I lost at regionals. That's just not realistic because we like to portray ourselves as being the best versions of ourselves. That is human nature. You want people to like you. Okay, we also heard that this is going to be much more accessible because otherwise people have to look for parenting advice from, reality TV. Once again, I gave you a lot of reasons as to where other support systems are actually available and where people can seek advice. And then we also heard that parents don't have the time to read a book. I think if parents, if you're pregnant, you probably do have the opportunity to read a book if you're genuinely that terrified of being a parent anyway. You can literally listen to a podcast, right? There's a lot of other material, again, other ways of learning on how to be a good parent rather than watching Whitney do a TikTok dance in front of her baby in hospital. Okay, on to my second point of clash on the quality of parenting. I'll also do a little bit of integrated rebuttal in my split point. So we heard that there's less of a barrier of entry for people to gain help. Again, I think all of my mechanisms still stand on the fact that you just do have general support systems in place around you as being a human. We are social creatures. We do probably want to help each other. And you don't need that help. I'm sorry, I am not going onto TikTok looking for them to give me advice on what diets I need to take because I'm playing a sport, right? This is not where people go inherently to get factual information. That is not where you are going for people to tell you, this is what your life is going to look like. And if that is the case, I think you have other things, like you have mental health influencers who can discuss things like depression if that is what you really care about, right? You do not need a parent to say, this was my very specific experience with depression. You can find relation to that in other forms of content. We also heard that like the algorithms are going to push this onto the right people's For You pages. Obviously, I think it's great if a teen mum has like a little bit of access as to this other teen mum's experience, right? But again, we have that inherent harm about things like pedophiles, which I just want to say we didn't actually get any responses to this, and I think that is a very important thing and a very major harm in this debate today that they haven't given us material on, in my opinion, that should have at least been touched at first. We also, again, we heard that people are going to be very honest because there's going to be a lack of engagement in their content if they are not. Again, I don't think this is true because you do not see, these major celebrities posting the very worst parts of their lives. What you do see is them going, spend a day in my life, like on my Sunday reset or during my Sunday reset, right? In my opinion, that's very unrealistic. Most people probably aren't going to be living that sort of lifestyle, right? Unless you have, the financial capacity to do so, which I think in this debate, most people don't have that capacity. Also, we heard that people are going to feel better about being parents because they can compare themselves as parents. I think comparison is an inherently harmful thing in this debate, and the fact that that was trying to be claimed as a benefit is just like completely false. And the reason for this is you now feel more guilt because you see this mother who is buying her child like this amazing like Barbie house that you literally cannot afford. You see this mother seeming to be very calm while her child is throwing a tantrum and not feeling this extreme level of like being overwhelmed because their child is like screaming, crying on the plane, right? What these parents now end up feeling is like they are failures as parents because they do not see the fact that every parent does actually struggle with these things. Before going on to my split point, I'll take POI.
Noting that people engage with and boost content that they feel good about, that they relate to, why are all of these celebrities, why are all of these glamorous mothers likely to become so popular on your side?
People don't always engage in content that they relate to, but even if they just want to relate to or engage in content that they do relate to, you can find a personal connection in literally any form of media, right? You do not need something that tells your like day-to-day life, it's like a step-by-step for you to feel related to it. You can literally say, oh yeah, I was a little bit sad when I got my NCA results, right? And therefore you relate to it. And again, I think these harmful videos do just get more engagement because personally, when I'm scrolling, I probably do feel more engaged if I see someone literally screaming at me, right? Like this is just inherently a lot more engaging than a child sitting there perfectly still. But even if that is the case, I think this also has some harms. Okay, now onto the context. I think with a regular 9 to 5 as a parent, you have the ability to switch off when you actually get home, when you're actually around your children, right? When you're an influencer parent, your life revolves around your job and only your job. That means your child is sitting at the dinner table screaming and crying. You decide to put a camera in their face, right? Ella's already outlined why this is so harmful, but I think this literally shows that you just disregard their well-being. I think this is harmful for the child. Another example of this is someone called Deja Clark. She literally has no opportunity to make the mistakes that any 13-year-old can make because she is now a celebrity, right? And I think this is going to be inherently harmful for kids' relationships with their parents. For all these reasons, the moot should stand.
That's the speaker for her speech, and we'd like to watch it with the second speaker of Engaging Solutions.
Sorry guys. We good. Okay. F seems to really hate parents. I can't seem to think of any parent who would, in good faith, dance in front of their own child's incubator. That is a monstrous thing that they push onto these influencers. But more to the point then, no one clicks on this kind of content because it is precisely so monstrous. It's downvoted to hell precisely because it's so monstrous. It gets reported into oblivion precisely because it's so incredibly monstrous. I think when this is their main push today, don't give them this one. 3 points I'm going to touch on. First, I want to clarify what all of this content most likely looks like. Second, I want to talk about their main push around exploitation and bullying. Thirdly, and finally, I want to introduce an extension about how we uncover exploitative parenting. Cool. What does this content look like? This section is going to be split into 2 halves. First, they take issue with this idea of the natural narrative. Essentially, they say that no one posts realistic content because this narrative exists. Because this kind of narrative exists. I want to note a few things here. First, that still doesn't engage with what we told you about people not seeking out help, right? They raise this kind of support network from the rest of your family and from the people around you. But you don't go to them because this overwhelming weight of expectation on you. In fact, you're least likely to go to these people because they're so personal,
Yeah, why?
because they know you, because they have the biggest expectations for you, because their opinion of you and your self-worth is so inextricably tied to them. What that means then is what you should actually believe is the most low barrier stuff is the most important. They raised this example of podcasts.
Yeah.
Note that podcasts take hours of time investment to actually get into. What the most important thing and the thing that actually gets into parents' eyes today then is the low investment stuff like Facebook, like Instagram Reels, like opening up your social media feed to
Yeah,
see
why?
another mother just like you. I'll also note that they do some of our arguing for us, right? Because it's so incredibly refreshing when people can buck this narrative. When someone appears with like disheveled, like bed hair and eye bags because their baby was
Yeah, why?
crying all night, that's something that's refreshing. That's something that's proximate to the average person. That's the kind of stuff that the algorithm actually promotes. Cool. The next thing they take issue with then, the next push they give you is that parents are likely to self-censor. Again, I will note
why?
that this logic cuts both ways. I certainly hope that the average parent and the average parenting influencer is self-conscious enough to realize that dancing in front of their child's incubator, probably not the best idea in the world. But then secondly, people really hate this
Yeah, why?
kind of content, right? That just rebuts their biggest harms. Like I flagged to you at introduction, this is the kind of content that gets downvoted into hell, that gets literally taken off YouTube because people hate it so much. Cool. But then even if you
Yeah,
don't
why?
believe a word of that, I think Mishti's built even ifs into her case, right? Like even if this kind of parenting content probably isn't the best, at least gives you a frame of reference to think about how you're treating your own child, about, hey, actually, I'm not
Yeah, why?
that bad of a parent, right? Because like I have this frame of reference of this really horrifying parent. It's probably catharsis for me, that's probably encouraging for me. But then it just looks like you seeking out a community of other parents in the comment section, of other
Yeah,
people
why?
who watch this kind of content. But then it's just reinforcing this message, like even if we believe all of this stuff about not having time, it's reinforcing this message that you as a parent are someone worthy of respect, that you as a parent are someone worthy of
Yeah, why?
taking time off to look after yourself. When we have this narrative that parenting that a child is the only thing that should be in a parent's life, I think that's particularly important. Note all the weighing that Mishti gives you that goes basically unengaged with. Parents are the people who face the most anxiety in their lives. Parents are the people who have to deal with the crushing burden of raising another human life, or perhaps ruining that life. I think anything we can do to lessen that kind of mental burden day to day for the many, many parents around the world is the most important thing in this debate. Before I move on, I'll probably take that point.
Don't people generally engage with content that they idolise? So why wouldn't the mums who go out and set unrealistic expectations get way more engagement than the ones who sit in front of a camera trying to give advice?
No, I don't go to content that I idolize, right? Like the beauty standards around the world, I think that's an intuitive example. If I see someone with a face full of Botox and chemicals all around their body, that's not something I want to engage with. In fact, I think it's really cringe and I downvote it. Cool. Next on this idea of exploitation, again, 2 parts to this point. First, they want to tell you that exploitation happens in the form of pedophilia. Second, they want to tell you that exploitation happens in the form of bullying. I want to deal with this idea of pedophilia really quickly. 3 responses to this. First, I think parents love their children enough to want to protect their kids from this kind of thing, right? So like, what that probably looks like then is they focus more on themselves. They're probably the person who appears most in their videos. They keep the clothes on their children, right? Like the only example they give here is this weird, really creepy example of a 3-year-old in a bathtub. But that also looks like blurring out the faces of their children, so on and so forth. They have a capacity to protect their children. I'm sure they love their children as well. They will do that. But then secondly, just the blindingly obvious, platforms want to police this kind of behavior, right? It's negative for their brand image. They want to take these pictures down. They want to look for these accounts that are overtly creepy. They have algorithms to do this. I think that they have incentive and a capacity to do this. But then thirdly, just note the amount of marginal change that they get, which is really small, right? Because if their harm is people having tame ways to look at children, unclear why they can't get this anywhere else, unclear why this is something you should swing the debate on. Then on this idea of embarrassing, that this is embarrassing, and people will get bullied for it. At the top of this, I just want to note that kids are probably insulated from the social consequences, right? They're not the ones who operate the social media accounts. The troll messages don't go to them. But then second, I also want to note that kids probably just don't watch parenting content. I think that the average kid at school probably doesn't bully a kid for that. But then I'll also note that social media is becoming increasingly normal. More people live their lives on social media. Unclear why that's something that the average kid actually gets bullied for. But then I'll note 2 more things. Again, parents probably care about their children enough to listen to what they have to say. They look like appearing less in their videos, blurring out their faces. But then secondly, just note that these videos can be taken down in the future. Why are platforms likely to do this? Because they're likely to want to avoid the damage to brand image, but then likely to want to yield to avoid the litigation of like, that this is on your platform without my consent. At the end of the day, don't believe the woo about pedophilia, don't believe the woo about bullying. Cool. Finally, my extension about how abuse on their side goes unnoticed. I'm just filling in the counterfactual that they still refuse to paint in. 3 things here. First, on parenting, if you have a parent that's really evil in their heart and really want to make money off their kids, first thing I think you have to do is you put your kid on camera. Like, these exploitative parents are the least likely to blur your faces, but also there are things on live streams that happen, like you simply just go off script and you capture something that you don't want to show to the world. Second, it forces these parents to justify the process of parenting to themselves, right? Ruby Franke had to use really torturous logic of, I'm a good Christian parent, to tell her kids to literally shut up. I think the average viewer can smell a rat. Cool. The impacts of this then is A, we uncover abuse, right? The bottom line of this is we won't know who Ruby Franke is if she wasn't a parenting influencer in the first place, or at least a really, really bad parenting influencer. Then secondly, I think we get more backlash against that kind of oppressive style of parenting that really scars children forever. At the end of the day then, why should you care about my extension? Because we can prove this abuse happens because this abuse, people learn about it in the first place. So for better parenting, for better experience for kids, please vote Neg.
Thank you, speaker, for your speech. We would like to welcome up the 3rd speaker of the Affirmative League.
We believe that the real world does in fact exist, and people have the ability to talk about parenting issues outside of social media. Two main points of clash in this debate. First of all, is how is the ability of the parent to care for their child impacted? And second of all, is do we see more unrealistic expectations or normalization of real issues through parenting influences on social media? First of all, how will we win this debate? Our pathway to victory is that we prove that exploitation happens with certainty on a massive scale with children posted on social media. We will prove that this is harmful because children are vulnerable, and this means that they are very severely impacted by this. We will prove that this sets unrealistic expectations. However, we think that this is actually slightly less important than actual children's futures and lives being in danger. And last of all, we will prove that this will break trust and ruin relationships and families, which we think is detrimental to the whole of society. We think that alternatively, the burden that Nick has in this case is, in order to win over our points, they must prove that exploitation does not happen at all with parenting influences on social media. And if they can't prove this, then they must explain why harming children or validating the weird fetishes of predators on social media is less important than some parents having, being able to watch TikToks of other parents. All right, first point of clash. How is the ability of the parent to care for the child impacted? Please note that a majority of our content revolves around this point, revolves around the exploitation seen on social media. We hear a big push from Nick saying that parents will protect their kids. I think that Nick lives in a very idealistic world. I think that many parents, while they do care about their kids, they're very likely to make unintentional mistakes because maybe they are just posting a cute moment in their kids' lives. However, they don't actually understand the mind of a predator or the way that people will perceive this content. I think there is an example of a little kid out there eating a banana, which ended up having hundreds of thousands of likes and saves on that video because of the weird way that it was interpreted by people. A very over-sexualized, disgusting way. We do not want to put our children in this kind of spotlight. Imagine how the child will feel when they grow up, when they are bullied from peers at school because that video is so viral, because their online footprint will continue to follow them. We think that some people are actually messed up, and these people, unfortunately, are able to have kids and do so. This means that people will have very screwed up urges to post weird footage of their kids on social media, which people will interpret in the wrong ways, and which can be used to further predatory instincts. We think that even a few of these cases happening is enough to have a severe impact on these children and on society. We think that this should be weighed very highly, because even if a few children are exploited, even if a few children's futures is ruined, this is severe enough to win us this debate. We hear that a frame of reference is good, because if you can see how bad other parents are doing with their kids, this is great for you. It's a nice little morale booster. Oh look, Susie's kid is throwing tantrums all the time, my little Johnny isn't like that. That's fantastic. However, I think we fail to mention the fact that that means that these kids are being treated bad. Is this what Nick stands for? Do they stand for kids online being treated bad, just so that parents watching it have a little confidence booster? Oh, I'm not so terrible after all. We think this is actually very harmful, because any kids being treated bad is a bad thing, because they are children, because they are vulnerable, because they do not have the ability to stand up for themselves. We hear that kids actually won't be bullied. I actually touched on that earlier. However, I think it is suffice to say that because of the virality of this content, because if you are having the shock factor in the content that is circulating on social media, you will be seen by your classmates. At least somebody will see that video. It can be passed around. This stuff does happen in real life. And again, as you grow up, your online footprint will follow you. If your future employee does a search on your name, they will be able to see all of that. If anyone searches up your name, they will be able to see everything posted about you online. We hear that parents actually won't seek out help from their support systems that they have in place. I think that we have said that there are actually support systems. People have family, people have friends, people have doctors, and if they cannot do this, then they can go and seek out specific support systems. You have baby classes that future parents will go to in order to learn how to raise their kids. And we think that people will actually go to these because they care about each other. Because I don't think that the evidence that Nick has given us is enough to prove that people will not go to their family, to the people that they care the most about when they need help. We think that, second of all, there is a lot of trust that you have in these people. We don't understand why, if you were really, really struggling in something, you wouldn't go talk to your mum or dad unless they had spent your entire childhood shoving your phone in their face, which is not, breaks their trust. Third of all, we think that this whole idea of having support from TikTok leaves out the human interaction side of it. When you are interacting with people in real life, when you have people who are physically and mentally there to support you, this is so much more than having a TikTok can give you, because these people, it is very likely your mother or your auntie or your grandma has also struggled with these issues, which means that they have the element of relatability that is being tried to claim on Neg's side. However, they are also there to physically support you. They are there to be able to babysit your kids when you want to have a break. They are there to actually offer you financial support. They are there to offer you emotional and physical support. We had another little thing about how no one will click on really horrific content, how the algorithm does not push this, and how this will get taken down. This is just false. The amount of absolutely absurd videos that are posted on social media and are still up on social media is absolutely overwhelming. And we think that if any of these involve children in any way, this is so harmful to that child, to any other people who are seeing that content. We think that the type of content that is likely to be posted is not just relatable, oh look how bad I look after looking after my child. It is attention catching, it is horrific and gruesome, because that is what gets people's interest. Because, teen boys might find it funny that, someone is dancing in front of their baby. Unfortunately, this does appeal to some people, and this does get promoted online. Again, we hear a bit more about how teen parents are supported because they can understand social media. I think I pretty sufficiently rebutted this earlier. But we'd also, would hope that teen mums hopefully do have the same support as everybody else. They do have family, they do have friends. And again, TikToks are not in the place of a proper support system, and you can't properly interact with them. We hear that you are able to uncover abuse if this stuff is posted online. However, we think that a lot of this abuse happens because it is posted online. We hear such horrific stories about that woman in Australia who would literally lock her kids up in her basement for days and not let them eat because they misbehaved. We think that if this buy-in doesn't happen from social media, this bad behavior is less likely to happen because people aren't so worried about the way that their kids are behaving and the way that their kids are being perceived and how aesthetic their Instagram page is. We think that this actually makes it non-accessible to actually uncover abuse, because in that case, it was the neighbour who called in and reported that these kids were being mistreated. It was not people on social media who actually had an impact in this case, so this cannot be claimed on their side. This means we have actually won this debate, won this point, because we have sufficiently rebutted all of the claims from Neg, and we have identified these as the most important part in this debate, because these are children, they are vulnerable, they cannot speak up for themselves, and they are our future generations. We are the ones who rely on them for the rest of humanity. I will really quickly touch on the unrealistic expectations versus normalization of real issues. We hear that parents want to help each other, and that's why they will post realistic content. Three responses to this: first of all, if you want to help people, you will not become an influencer, you'll probably become a doctor or a coach, or you'll be there to properly actually support people and not just post, oh, look at me in my cute, maternity suit. Second of all, influencers do want money. That is their job, which means that they will unfortunately prioritize the bits of their social media over their kids a lot of the time, because they need that money, because they rely on that for their career. Third of all, even if they have good intentions, it is hard to do this successfully. It is hard to prioritize the care and the well-being of your child, as well as being able to make money if you're not guaranteed the shock factor. At the end of this debate, we believe that at the very least that you believe on our side of the house, we can stop the exploitation, sexualization and harassment of just a handful of children who are the most vulnerable members of our society and the constituents of the future of humanity. That is enough for us to win this debate.
Thank you, speaker, for your speech. I would like to welcome on the first speaker from the Negating team.
At the top of the speech, I just really want to drive home the fact that they gave absolutely no response to Alan's split. There is a counterfactual in this debate, and if we prove to you that this counterfactual is worse than the status quo, we win this debate. Okay, I'll chat about three things. Firstly, on the counterfactual. Secondly, on exploitation. Thirdly, on other parents. Firstly, on the counterfactual. We told you two things. I know that they said there was no response. They just said that they don't need a counterfactual, but this is a regrets debate. You all need a counterfactual. We told you two things. Firstly, we told you that in the comparative, there's likely less accessibility because people like celebrities rise. Note that this got no response. Secondly, we told you at Alan, and this split is to show you that abuse goes unnoticed, and I really want to drive this home. Alan told you that obviously parents who still want to exploit their children probably still exist. But these parents are likely going to work behind the scenes. They're likely not going to go unnoticed because they don't have this pressure of becoming a parent influencer. What that means is that incentives to exploit your children still exist on both sides of the house, but on their side it goes absolutely unnoticed. On our side of the house, at least you have accountability mechanisms. Because what you have on our side of the house is you can report people.
Yeah, why?
Is what Alan told you about these companies having incentives to take these down. In the comparative, it is completely unclear why this abuse firstly goes away, but secondly, why parents are able to actually be caught. You ought to weigh this highly, because the worst case for us is that parents might get some bad advice, but the worst case for them is that these parents never get exposed out, these parents never get ratted out, and people don't find any connection at all. What I've shown you at the end of this clash then is that our counterfactual stance. Abuse exists both sides, but on their side they never notice it in the first place. You all weigh that highly if you care about children, if you buy their weighing about children. Okay, now on to exploitation. Now the big claim today was that there's going to be a lot of harassment, bullying, predators. A few responses to predators first. Firstly, we just say that it is literally illegal, but we say that even if you don't believe that, we believe a lot of these predators are likely going to go onto worse sites in the counterfactual. I'll prove that later. But the first thing I'd say, and the first response to harassment and bullying, is just to look at the counterfactual. Lots of kids' channels, for example Ryan's Toys, have parents exploiting them behind their backs, i.e. they are not influencers. When family channels are rising, when parents are pressured to come out, it means that parents are likely going to come out now because one, it is the popular thing to be a parent influencer, but B, we'd say people are extremely curious of who's managing these kids. That is when exploitation comes out. That looks like, for example, the Twin Toys parents who did Nerf Wars, they got exposed out for being exploitative. But secondly, it results in Ryan's Toys, for example, coming out. It shows that they're extremely exploitative. And note that we can co-opt a lot of their impacts now. Because on our side of the house, that means these children go into mental health because they are the sole ones on the internet. For example, only Ryan's Toys and not Ryan's Toys and their parents. It results in more humiliation. It results in only one child present, and that's extremely harmful for everything about mental health. But even if you don't believe that, we just say exploitation is it's a lot easier to deal with on our side of the house. We'd say that the mother who danced in front of her kids who were incubating, we'd say that she probably got massive backlash and people did not want to see her again. But we'd say there are other signs of youth being sad. Just for example, if you look at videos from 1 year to the next, you probably see that children get a lot more introverted. You probably see that children get a lot more affected. But secondly, we knew about Ruby Frank because she came out as a parent influencer. We knew that she was exploiting her children because she became a parent influencer. In the comparative, it is completely unclear why these parents are going to stop bullying their children and why in the comparative that they're able to rat them out. What that means is that on our side of the house, you're able to get more intense scrutiny. You're able to actually speak out. We will weigh this highly. But even if you don't believe that, we just say that most of the parent and content looks like, for example, the outdoor boys. Looks like going out with your children to camp, going out. It's extremely wholesome content insofar as 99.9% of parents probably have a biological connection to their child. They don't want to exploit their child as such. And we also say that on our side of the house, you have more opportunities to be wholesome. Because now these parents are propagating things like games that you can try out. They provide a lot of advice, and they talk to, for example, about how kids can go to school. What that means is that the comparative is a world where these parents aren't ratted out. But even if you don't believe that, we weigh that on loneliness. Because obviously in the comparative, these parents do not have the ability to get access to information or move on to this in the next clash. At the end of this clash, then, you have to weigh on the likelihood. Because on our side of the house, sure, there might be some exploitative parents, but in the comparative, there's far more, and they aren't going to be ratted out. But even if you don't believe that, we weigh on reversibility. Because you can report, you can take things down, which means that at the end of this clash, exploitation is far worse on their side of the house, insofar as parents still have incentives to exploit their child, but they just do it behind the scenes. You ought buy then that we win exploitation. Okay, now moving on to parents, but before I do that, I'll take a POI.
So wouldn't sexually implicit child content increase the amount of people who do interact with worse sites and get used to really disgusting behaviour? Doesn't this normalise this? And don't you agree this is very harmful?
I'll move on to this into my next clash in terms of other parents. Okay, the first thing that they talk to us is that they're going to be selective posting, and note that this is like probably responsive to their POI. We'd say a few things. You still need to look at the comparative and this responds to their POI, because we'd say that celebrities are more likely to rise because obviously they're extremely popular and obviously they get the spotlight. What that means is it is only uniquely these celebrities that are propagated on their side of the house. And if they want to talk about things such as child predators, they're more likely to exist on their side of the house insofar as these kids are like insofar as celebrities have incentives to literally abuse their kids. For example, look at Kim Kardashian showing off her children, etc. That's extremely abusive, and that leads to things such as child predators. But we'd say that insofar as these celebrities are likely to rise, that is what uniquely exists on their side of the house. On our side of the house, then, note that Mishti gave you 2 reasons as to why you're going to get more relatable content. Firstly, she told you that now there's going to be more unpolished content. You're not going to have like extremely good filming studios, etc. It likely looks like more wholesome content, which means that you are able to get more relatable content. Note that this got no response from the opposition whatsoever. But secondly, we also told you that people literally look for relatability. Yes, those 10 boys that they talk about probably are invested in like child predator, but we'd say that for a parent, they likely care about how to raise their actual child. They aren't going to want to buy into like their children literally dying, dancing in front of an incubator. We think that is extremely uncharitable for them to assume that. But secondly, we'd also say what this mostly looks like is, for example, outdoor boys. You document your everyday lifestyle, you share like amazing nature, you go on camps, etc. You have lots of fun. You teach, you like engage in board games, etc. We think that's the most likely characterization. But even if you don't believe that, you have to buy the fact that algorithms tailor to the demand of the people. I get videos of people's struggles, Alan probably watches completely something different. Therefore, insofar as these parents have the incentives to A, treat their child well, it means that they're likely going to find relatable content. And this relatable content is extremely important because obviously no one wants to see this highly commercialized, highly fashionable things. They want to look at A, how to raise their child, B, they likely want to get support. They responded to our claim, like Mishi's told you, that you can't get help otherwise. They said that you can ask your parents and you can find other support systems. The first thing I'd say is parents are probably symmetric. You can probably ask your parents anyways. But B, we'd say the most important stakeholders are probably these young teenagers who are trying to become parents. On their side of the house, they do not cater to them at all. Because obviously, you need they do not cater to them at all because obviously you can't read a book and learn how to be a parent as a young teenager. But secondly, we'd say even if you don't believe that, these parents want validation. They feel ashamed of asking people of advice. We believe that when they get into a community that they can share their opinions and thoughts, that's when they're able to share their advice. At the end of this debate then, you have to weigh on the worst case. On our side, yes, we might get some bad advice, but in the comparative, parents are lonely. You might get some child predators, but on the comparative, you never actually get anything exposed. For all those reasons, I'm very proud to oppose.
Next speaker for speech. As is customary, I would like to reverse in order and invite the class speaker to the negating team.
A parent who is stressed, anxious, and under pressure is much more likely to act out on their children. A parent who doesn't know what they're doing because they don't have a support network and can't invest hours into listening to one of their podcasts is a parent who doesn't raise their child well. Parents underlie this entire debate. They're the ones who have the infinite capacity to make or break a child's life. You should care about them the most. 2 things I want to talk about in this reply. First, the 2 forms of exploitation that they identify at first, and I want to deal with that quickly. But then secondly, I want to focus the rest of the speech on why you ought to care about parents more. Cool. First, on exploitation, they identify 2 things at first. First, on this idea of predators, note a couple things here. First, it's unclear the extent to which this happens and the extent to which they can actually change this. If this is an innocuous mistake, you ought to believe that this happens on both sides of the house. Second, if it's as bad as they claim, fundamentally unclear why YouTube won't just take it down. I believe no response to this. But then thirdly and finally, just weigh out the amount of change that they're able to get. It's fundamentally unclear why this is the tipping point that makes people seek this kind of thing out. Unclear why just having this one change is going to solve this problem forever. Cool. Second then, on this idea of bullying and of embarrassment, a few things here. Josh points out to you, again, it's unclear why this happens to such a large extent. I think the average influencer probably still loves their children to some extent. That means they won't stick a camera in front of their face for 24/7. But then uniquely what Josh tells you then is it's unclear why things that are more malicious don't simply take the place of family influences. Of quote unquote child channels where children are center stage in entertainment. Unclear why this more exploitative form, for example, of celebrities sticking their children in cameras won't actually take precedence. That's why the counterfactual that we fill in for you is actually really important. But then let's be charitable here, let's give them this entire thing. Weigh this out on two metrics then. First, it's unclear the severity to which this bullying and this embarrassment happened, right? People literally live out their entire lives on social media. Unclear why this is a huge tipping point in this debate. But then second, unclear again why this isn't reversible, like I told you at second. YouTube, you can literally just petition YouTube to take these things down. Unclear why this happens to the range that they want to claim. Cool. Then on our push on parents, we told you two big things. First, we told you that parents engage with the things that they like and just intuitively. If something makes you feel really bad about yourself, you probably don't flagellate yourself by seeking it out more. Just intuit that. But then secondly, you engage with things that actually work for you, otherwise you don't go back. That means then at Mishti, we prove to you that parenting things are likely to be practical and implementable. If that's true, I think we win automatically, because it makes the experience of parenting easier. But also, there's the concrete benefits of very young parents who are time poor, who are vulnerable, who don't have any support networks, being able to raise their children better for the long term. Note that the mental health then of a parent informs the experience of every single child in the world. Like I flagged to you at introduction, parents who are less stressed can spend more quality time with their children, are less likely to lash out at their children and give them lasting psychological trauma. Well, at the end of this debate then, I think that the thing you ought to remember is that parents underpin this entire debate. But even if it isn't, let's talk quickly about children. I want to whip again this idea of marginal change. On their side of the house, it's fundamentally unclear why the truly monstrous parents of the world will ever change. If that's a benefit they want to raise, they need to prove it more. At the end of this debate, stand with parents, stand with children, vote Neg.
And to speak for a speech, and finally, I would like to welcome up the class speaker to the Affirmative team.
Claiming that Kim Kardashian is an abusive mum because she's allowing Northwest to perform in a live-action version of The Lion King makes no sense whatsoever. 2 points of clash in today's debate. Which side is more harmful to children? And secondly, which side is impacts parents more? Okay, what did we give on children? We gave a lot of material on predators and why this is so harmful. Though there has been rebuttal by side negating on this, I actually don't think they interacted with Ella's material at first on the fact that this content is sexually implicit, meaning it is not a child who is literally doing all of these OF things that they are trying to characterize, right? Obviously this invisible market where predators are posting things of children is still going to exist, so that whole idea that we're not getting rid of predators, I think completely completely misses what we were actually saying. What we are saying is if you post a video of your child eating a banana, it can be misinterpreted by a predator or misconstrued in such a way that does become harmful to this child, right? We got no real engagement as to why YouTube, TikTok, Instagram is going to delete a video of a child eating a banana, right? It's just not going to happen. You're not literally violating community guidelines, so all of their rebuttal falls through, and that first point still stands at the end of this speech. We also heard that it's illegal, so they're not going to post the stuff. Well, duh. Obviously, they're not posting that stuff. They are posting implicit things. So I think you need to just consider what we actually gave you. So what else did we actually give you on harms to children? We said that they are emotionally harmed to some extent, whether it be today or in 10 years down the line. They are probably going to be quite upset seeing that their parents were exploiting them, right? We gave you a lot of content on why these influencers exploit them, because of the fact that it is literally their job. It is how they earn money. That is why they are likely to exploit them. We gave you material on the fact that that the posting and stuff is going to be quite shocking. It is going to be the things of this child, like having an embarrassing moment, because it does get more engagement. I don't think we really heard any sufficient responses as to how this doesn't emotionally damage you in the long run. We also gave you materials on like a job, the fact that your digital footprint hangs around for the rest of your life, and when you have literally no control over what is being posted about you on social media, that is going to harm you in the future. We did not hear sufficient responses on this. We also heard that parents aren't going to exploit their kids because they care about them. Once again, we have given you a lot of material on the fact that these parents are likely to exploit these children because their lives and their livelihoods are contingent on this exploitation. So whether it is their intention or not, it is going to happen. Once again, insufficient responses to this point. Okay, now to my second point of clash on the impacts to parents. What did we actually say? We say that what happens is things like selective posting or the very best of your life. We only heard that people want to interact with like casual content, right? We don't think that this is true, but even if it is true that they do want to engage with very casual content, it wasn't clear why this is going to be posted more because of all the shaming material that they gave us in their case, okay? They also said, what is also more beneficial on our side is we actually get human contact. This is what Lara brought in her third speech. We get the advantage of you can reach out to these communities. What they want is for people to solely rely on an online support network with people they literally cannot physically see, right? Obviously, this is inherently going to be harmful. We also heard a lot of material on the fact that people feel better by comparison, which literally shows you that there are very exploitative, bad online parenting influences, which again harms their case. On these 2 points of clash, we've won today's debate.
I'd like to thank both teams for a really engaging debate today, and feel free to cross the floor and shake hands. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I forgot that. What? Good job. Good job. Good job. Wait, I'm so sorry. I just fully walked into you. It's okay.